Okay, welcome everyone to another exciting episode of the Graybeard Talks Geospatial. And today it's a beautiful, sunny but cold day here in central Pennsylvania. Glad to have along one of my favorite Critigen developers, a guy named Colin Sullivan. Say hi, Colin.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, for some reason I can't hear you. I don't know if everybody else can hear you, but I can't hear you. Let's see. If I can get anybody from the outside that's listening, if you can hear Colin, let me know. Or if you can't hear me,
I can hear you.
Let me see. Let me just check a couple things. This is where you don't panic. This is where you.
Yep. Mike says he hears us.
Let me see. No panicking here. Hold on if you're listening. Hang tight. We'll get this right. Colin, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good. I can hear you too. The sound isn't going to be optimal here because I'm going to have to ditch my my good mic and just go with my Jabra. So just roll with me. We'll make it. Okay, good. Hey, Colin, where are you coming from? Where's home?
I am in Southeast Virginia in Chesapeake. Yeah, live right down here. Grown up right around here in one of the neighboring cities, but in Chesapeake now.
And for those who don't know where Chesapeake is, that is close to Virginia Beach, right? Right next to Virginia Beach.
Yep, next to Virginia Beach in Norfolk.
Good. And hey, thanks everybody for weighing in. Those of you who've already come in, who are here. I've got Mark Tates, I've got Tim Nolan, Tiffany Lang, Mike Eggenberger. Thanks everybody for coming on. Sorry for the sound quality. Something happened with my mic, and we're just going to have to deal with it the way it is. So, what I was going to, you have two kids, right?
Yep. Daughter is almost 4 in April, and her name's Olivia. And then we had a boy who's 7 months and 4 days. 3 days.
And you grew up in that area. You went to college in Virginia, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was called Longwood University. Not exactly a technical college, but yep, it's out a little west from here.
Okay, how long have you been with Critigen, Colin?
I think it's going to be 12 years in May, I believe.
Okay, good. 12 years. That predates Critigen.
Yes.
So who did you start work for?
Oh, I started work on a project called it was called Navy Clean in Vieques is where the project was headed. And all the folks there who hired me, I think quickly went part-time, and then I got moved around from manager to manager for a little while. Yeah.
Something I'm interested in is when you and I prepared for this, you were telling me that and I thought this was the funniest thing. And for those of you who are on and who are listening, and I appreciate you being here today, I just want to ask Colin a little bit about his background, because I think a lot of people watch the live stream either recorded or live because they're interested in career progression, kind of what happens at Critigen and the kinds of things. Colin told me when we were preparing for this that he didn't feel like he was qualified to do this job when he was hired. So maybe you can elaborate on that, Colin.
Yeah. So I totally agree with that. I wasn't remotely qualified for the job. I did in college. I decided going in that I want to do something kind of safe, so I did business. But I always liked computers, so I concentrated in computers. But it really wasn't a programming job. I'd always liked programming, even in high school. But I didn't know at the time, I guess like a lot of kids going into college, just how that would work out. And then towards the end of it, I decided I really liked programming. I did an internship with Virginia Beach government, and then really decided towards the end of my junior year that's what I wanted to do. And I graduated college, worked for a year at actually I think I interviewed for a job at Critigen, which was at CSUM Hill at the time, and didn't get the job. And then I did take a job doing really basic web design for a company that did Made sites for people that would sell like boats and equipment and stuff like that. And it was just very basic. But at that point, I started studying PHP at the time because I thought maybe I could get a job doing that. Interviewed again at Critigen, again CHM Hill at the time, and for whatever reason they hired me. So I don't know what I did or said that was so good, but
For someone who's not remotely qualified to do
mm,
what you're doing, to someone has a 12-year longevity at the company, tell me what you did right. I'm curious. What did you do right?
yeah. So what I did, so I mentioned that Viegas project. So I came in and I was doing, again, I didn't really have any spatial background, but I came in and started working, making maps. One of the people I worked with taught me how to work on Arc Desktop, and I would make maps for the project. And then from there, I just kind of bounced around between different opportunities, really. And I think from there, I ended up becoming a SharePoint admin for a while and did some SharePoint development. Somewhere along the way, CHM Hill, for people that maybe don't know, was I know they've been sold again, so I don't know if they have the same name, but they were a huge company, and Critigen was brought in to do the technology side for them. But at some point, they decided that they didn't want to have us in-house, so they sold us, and then we went from this huge company down to a very small company. And I think the way I survived was, just I would do whatever I could. So I just always wanted to be useful. I always enjoyed working and what I was doing. So I would just jump from technology to technology, work on database stuff, work on middle tier stuff. I would do, like I said, SharePoint. I did Flash. I did Silverlight. I did, JavaScript, which I still do now, but it was different back then. And really just jump from thing to thing I think that's how I survived. And
Yeah.
it's given me, and how has it gotten me to here? I've gotten a really, I guess, a skill set that you can't really learn. I think you just experience it. But I'm able to, because I jump to so many different places, I'm able to pick up at least enough to get going pretty quickly. So I feel like that's maybe my best skill that I just happen to have acquired along the way.
I want to follow up on that. But Tim says, did you find making maps easy or hard, coming from a dev background?
Well, I'm not really a dev background. I guess it was no background. So
No background. Did you find
yeah,
working with maps, like, was it intuitive? Was it easy? What was it?
I mean, I think that was. I mean, it was like Arc Desktop, so it was. You have a big toolbox of different things you click on. I mean, the concepts can be challenging of knowing, like when I would try and measure like locations or select things and have a polygon sit and select points inside and outside them. So a lot of the technology, the terminology, took some getting used to for sure. So that part was a bit of a learning curve. I think the tools itself, I don't think were too bad.
Well, what I wanted to point out. Thanks for your question, Tim, and I appreciate everybody who wants to weigh in. Please ask questions, because that's one of the reasons that we're here. Colin just happens to be one of our most senior developers. He's really good at what he does. In fact, I'm working with him. The most recent thing that he and I are working on is there's a paving company that wants a truck scheduling application, and it's fairly complex and has lots of different moving parts. And Colin's just really on top of everything. And I guess the point I wanted to draw out of you there is that, even though the technology might be fairly sophisticated wherever you're working, it takes a desire to want to do what the job is and to want to dig in and learn. You told me earlier that you just learn something new all the time, and that's what kept you employed. And I think we live in a time when that's a really important concept to get across.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had to, I guess, because of the way the company was changing and we were getting smaller. So I had to do it. But I also enjoy it. And yeah, I mentioned to you, I think, I mean, in any technology field, you have to be adaptive and want to learn. And if you don't, it won't be long before you're out of a job, really.
Yeah, very good. Well, okay, before we dive in, let's just say, so Tiffany says, no base map, huh? Good learning one-on-one. So Tiffany's always got some good comments. Thank you, Tiff, for engaging. So let's talk application development, because I think one of the coolest things that maybe we're maybe not known for, Critigen, but I think we do a really good job of, is creating spatial apps and or configuring, say, Esri out of the box apps or whatever to meet the spatial needs of businesses. And so one of the things I want to talk about is when you said to me, spatial apps, when it comes right down to it, spatial apps are just an app, right? They have to be fit for purpose, but there are some special considerations when you're building spatial apps. Maybe we could talk through some of what those special considerations are with spatial apps.
Yeah, it's for sure. I mean, there's a whole back end to it that I won't get into that I think is important and has a lot of the decision making is involved there to because of the spatial needs. So I think, yeah. So like you said, it is just an app or application. So there, in that case, it shares a lot of the same functions and requirements any app would. The stuff that I think that it becomes a little bit more tricky for us is determining per project how involved the mapping is going to be. I mean, there's different ways. We've done apps of all kinds. So, like on the paving project you're talking about, we have a map as the entire application, and then a bunch of widgets sit on top. We also have cases where the map could be smaller. So it's just trying to determine how important the spatial functionality is for the application versus are they also collecting just normal data, business data? Do they have, let's say they're storing employees, the information for that would be entered, not on a map but in a different type of interface. So just trying to figure out how everything connects together, I think, is the big challenge.
In some of the apps you've done, like, tell me some of the options for how someone would access a map. Like there are a couple different ways that they can do that.
Yeah, I think it depends, I think, per project. Like we have ones, like I said, there's certainly the kind where it's the full page. There's ones where you're going to have a panel of some kind with options on the left and then map on the right. You could have a situation where there's no map to start. You're entering data, you're making decisions, maybe narrowing down what you're inputting to then get to a page where you would have a map. So it just depends on, I think, the use cases for that particular project where and how you want to bring in the spatial aspect.
Yeah, how important, like, what are the considerations that make something the most successful? We talked about this with this paving app we're doing. The design seems to be driving the scope of work, like the outcome, the final product, or drives the entire scope of work. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I think it certainly can. Yeah, for sure. I think that we have, yeah. So I mean, the questions we talked to, or the parts we talked about, as far as, let me see. I think, yeah. Sorry.
Colin's looking at his cheat sheet.
Yeah, I'm trying to, but I'm getting lost.
Well, that's okay. Let's not go down that road. Let's just go down a different road then. Okay. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about, I think, are development approaches.
Mm.
And so one of the things that's most fascinating to me is to see.
Right.
Now all kinds of.
Uh-oh. All right, we'll hang tight while he tries to get back in. So while we're waiting for Bruce, I think something I started mentioning that I really did want to talk about. All right, you back in?
I'm back in. I am.
Right.
Yes. That was weird. Go ahead. Keep going.
No, all I was going to say was there is this distinction that these are geospatial apps, but at the end of the day, they are just applications. It just depends on, it just has some extra requirements and things you have to think about because of everything that comes with a map and all the data that goes with it and all the extra decisions to make there. But it is at the end of the day just an app, so has a similar process that most would. And when I got kind of lost there a minute ago, because I was going to start talking about Agile a bit with that with the design, because it is that particular client is so happy to support an Agile approach. But I'll let you set that up maybe.
No, I guess one of the things I've been interested in is how an Agile approach works with a client, because I think the way my head works, the projects I've been involved with in my career, waterfall makes a lot of sense. You give someone a milestone, and then you build to the milestone, and then you build to the next milestone, and you process a payment, and then you get to the end, and you have final sign off. But Agile doesn't work that way, does it?
Right. Yeah. So I won't go into the whole explanation of what Agile is, the methodology, and all the rules and processes. To me, it's a concept of just being as adaptive and flexible as possible and being able to pivot your approach rapidly. That particular client does that very well. So again, just trying to think of the concept of it as a kind of an evolving concept when I'm developing an interface in an Agile approach. And I think like what you just described, I think with interfaces, they are so moldable. We don't have no interface has to be the exact same, and often it's going to change based off of the client because, and I won't go again into too much into the user experience of it, but we all have different ways that we expect an application to work. If there's a button, like we know to click it. If there's certain different things we can do that you expect like in an app to hover and something to happen. So that changes from person to person. So the way that I like to use our Agile approach in that is to be able to really fine tune an interface. So just because I think it should work a certain way doesn't mean the client, or doesn't mean the end user, or the person who's going to ultimately be working on the application is going to think the same way I do.
Does that happen a lot, Colin? Like when you present, you do these in sprints. Is that right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, if we try to get into some of the I guess a broader idea of what Agile approach is you breaking down a big project into little chunks called sprints, and they could be a week, could be 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks. And the concept of a sprint would be that at the end of the sprint, you're delivering something. So instead of taking your traditional waterfall where you might do a big, giant, requirements gathering at the beginning, and then you just go, and then maybe you do have some deliverables along the way, but typically it's at the end is your big deliverable. Agile, yeah, sprints, and then depending on how structured it needs to be, the main idea there is that you're delivering pieces of the project as it goes along. So you're not going to start with the finished product. You're going to present, each piece, which depending on a client, how they want to work with it. But in the one that we've been talking about, the client is very involved and they want to see each piece, and then they are giving their feedback. We're taking that feedback and applying it.
Did you work with? I think you worked with me on that New York project, right? You were involved in that.
Yes, the trash.
That was kind of a hybrid, right? Where we had milestones to meet, but we were also presenting things as we went to reduce the design rework. Am I feeling about that right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the whole hope is that you're not going to get to the end of a project and then say, here's what you asked for, it, and checks all the boxes, and then the client says this doesn't look good, it doesn't work for what we need, our needs have changed, this really doesn't work for us, or these pieces we want changed, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a deadline and you're behind.
Yeah, that method seems really like collaborative. Like when we're building to a design, we're building to an ideal state. But then as we go, we're open to collaborating with the end user or the customer to be able to say, oh, you know what, that doesn't really work for us. We thought it would work for us, but it doesn't really work for us. How frustrating is that for you as a developer to have that happen?
That's a good question. It depends. It depends on how excited or happy I am about something. It depends if if a client says we want something like this, and then but we don't care how you accomplish it. We know it needs to do something, and then I go and maybe I've been researching on my own or looking stuff up, and I'm excited about something that for sure there's times, or I just have a strong opinion about how I think something should work. But ultimately, though, my whole career, my goal is to give the best possible, most efficient product for the client. So I try not to get too upset if what I think someone wants isn't what they want.
I can see from your reaction that this is not an uncommon occurrence.
No, it just depends. It's all, I think, I would say that Critigen, our company, is an agile company, but our clients aren't all agile. And when I say agile, I mean, not every client wants to meet potentially once or twice a week. They don't, they want a more traditional waterfall. So I think we have to end up being very flexible in our approach there too, and say, I believe that agile approach gives you the best end product. Being able to get that feedback along the way. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Tiffany.
Yeah.
I think it gives you the ability to make sure that what's handed over at the end is exactly what they want.
Yeah.
It is client specific and project specific as to how far agile, how far waterfall, what makes the most sense.
Yeah, the reason I'm going and hitting this so hard is because I think one of the core principles that we work on at Critigen is collaboration, right? So Agile seems to fit right into that framework that we present to our clients, is that we want to be collaborative. This might be hard for us, but we understand it. Well, our job here is to meet your needs, not necessarily meet ours. We're supposed to build something that's fit for purpose, not something that we think is the best option necessarily. But I was just interviewing a client a minute ago about some work we'd done, and one of the things they said about us is that their thoughts were that we were unfailingly honest up front, so that they knew what they could and couldn't do. Like there were times when you just say, "I'm sorry, that can't happen that way." Has that ever happened to you?
For sure, and I think that's part of. I mean, yeah. Again, it's everything is so client specific, and it depends if you're doing a project that's more of a configuration based. A lot of the interfaces I do, especially if we're just talking just straight web design, JavaScript design, there really is no, I have not hit a limit to where I have to say that's not possible. It's a matter of, can we get this done within the budget and the timeline in place? But I feel like it's very flexible. With the configuration type project, you definitely have to do that more. So for sure.
Yeah. So Tim wants to know when you started the Agile journey. When did you start building in with the Agile methodology?
So we did it, I think, let's see, probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, 6, 7, something like that.
And we kind of been refining our approach ever since. I think that's one of the things that we can bring. Like when we put a proposal in front of a client, one of the things we talk about is our Agile methods. And I think they're pretty tight. I mean, for being loose, they're pretty tight. You think?
I think we've adapted to the scenarios, and I know when my agile journey started, we really had a very strict process. We wanted to have like all the pieces in place for an agile approach: the Scrum Master, the daily meetings, and hitting each of the exact pieces that you need. And I don't know that it's always. It certainly doesn't always work out that way in the real world. I feel like it's much like you said, collaborative, determining if the client is willing to meet enough to do that. If the team's big enough to need a daily stand-up type call to work on around that.
Yeah. Tim asks, do you have an app dev team that works on your client projects? Or are you co-located?
We have a bunch of developers that are all over the place. Right now, I have some folks in Seattle and on the West Coast that I'm working with on projects. It just depends on the type of project and the different people we need to put in it.
Yeah, we're a mostly remote company, so a few people work out of offices, but most everybody works out of their own home, and we bring people together depending on their skill sets to mix and match for different projects. So Colin's worked with a bunch of different teams since I've known him, but just to give Colin props, everybody always wants Colin. So
Thank
you must be doing something right. You must be doing something right.
I try.
For sure. Hey, before we end for the day, one of the things I wanted to pick your brain about is that, like, well, no, let me ask before we go down that road. If you could choose to do, like, say, let's just say Esri COTS configuration, like configuring a commercial off-the-shelf product. Let's say Esri, because that's probably what happens most often, right? Or to do